Hi, Ro here. I'm just about to launch my book, Coaching Self-Organising Teams. And if you missed the book launch, well, here it is. See you soon. Excellent. Okay. So, whether you're at home, whether you're at work, whether you're listening on a mobile or a laptop, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to the Coaching Self-Organising Teams book launch party. It is finally here after all this time. I'm delighted to see you all here, and I really want to thank you for joining me in celebrating a topic dear to my heart, teams, and more importantly, self-organising teams. So I'll be sharing with you today how I came to write this book, give you a taste of the contents of the book, and also some special launch bonuses. So stay tuned, as they say. And there's also, before I mustn't forget, 𝘊𝘖𝘀𝘆 will tell me off if I forget. So we've also got a hashtag for the book and the book launch, which is CSOT Flourish, which is Coaching Self-Organising Teams Flourish. So if you want to tweet or put any posts on Instagram or social media, then please use that hashtag, and that would be really, really appreciated. So let's see if I can get the technology to play with me today. Hi, it's working so far. So if you've never heard of me before, and there will be some people on the call who haven't, I'm really overwhelmed by the response and interest in the topic. So thank you very much for accepting the invitation to the book launch. Then my name is Gorell. I've written a number of books on the topic of coaching. We're covered with my co-author, Gillian Jones. Okay, so if I can just ask you to go on to mute, or maybe 𝘊𝘀𝘀, if you can just put everybody on to mute, and then we'll have a chance to hear from you in a few minutes. So I've written a number of books, including a couple with my co-author Gillian Jones. I specialise in organisational change and team and group coaching, and I've been writing about the topic since really 2008. I think that was when we first published our book on, it was the top tools for coaching and how to create a coaching culture. So in terms of how I got started with this book, I was approached by Routledge in May 2019 now to write a book for their professional coaching series on a topic dear to my heart. And I chose the topic of self-organising or coaching self-organising teams because I've been working with teams for most of my career, and I spotted a few trends, particularly when it came to teams that were given a task that they had to do on their own. So there was no particular sort of leadership involved, but they were asked to actually go ahead and do something on their own. And so I thought, well, why not write a book on it? I'm also really interested in behavioural science, as Sarah and Charlotte will tell you. And so I wanted to include something in there on behavioural science as well. And hence the book took form. So I think I submitted my first chapter in, I think it was something like June or July of 2019. And then this time last year, I was just reflecting with 𝘊𝘀𝘀, I was actually writing the book. So it takes a while to write a book and then get it published. So I'm absolutely thrilled that the book is now out there. And I'm even more thrilled with the cover, because I actually love the cover. I think it's brilliant. I love abstract art. And I think the organic nature of the painting, as it says to me, it's about how things shape and form and flex. And I think that's really appropriate when you're talking about self-organising teams. So, and it's my favourite colours as well. So the full house. So that's a little bit about me. However, I don't want it just to be about me today. Obviously, it's about my book, but I really want to hear from you. So what I'd like to hear from you is for you to share your thoughts about what a dream team means to you. So a couple of sentences, share them in the chat box about what a dream team means to you. And I'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that. So don't be shy. What's the dream team mean to you? Ah, Brendan, hi, nice to see you. I love that. Made up of people who, oh, that's just disappeared. Made of people who know more than I do, but don't look down on me because of that. I love that. That's brilliant. Team of smart people who support and challenge each other to get the work done in a safe space. Absolutely, yeah, love that as well. Collaborate, create amazing things, support each other. Brilliant. Makes the most of each other's strengths and covers each other's weaknesses. Trust and support. Cheering each other on, yay. Even when a team member has a bad day, I think that's really important. Yeah, we all have bad days and you need team members to actually support you in that. Humour, definitely. Fantastic. So we're all pretty clear on what makes a dream team. I have to say, probably in my working life, I've worked with a couple of dream teams. And when you work with a dream team and you've had an experience of working with a nightmare team, you certainly appreciate the difference, and it makes you realize how important having that teamwork and great team environment is to not only mental health, but also how well you can perform your job as well. So that's fantastic. And that's kind of the inspiration behind the book as well. It was thinking about, you know, what actually makes a dream team and how does a dream team then work together to become self-organizing. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to share a few things from the book. I'm also going to talk about the book launch series, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask questions and we can have a bit of a chat. So probably going to spend about 10-15 minutes talking about the book. I don't want to go into too much depth. I just want to give you a flavour for what it's about. And then I'd like to give you an opportunity to ask questions and have a conversation. Because as we know, when we work with teams, it's all about the conversation and reflection and learning. So in terms of the book, these were the key questions that I kind of posed as I wrote the book or started to write the book. I was thinking, what in my experience of working with feedback on the loop there. In my experience of working with teams, these were the key questions that sort of came to mind. So how do we connect with each other to create trust is all about how do you quickly create that safe space where people can actually contribute in a way which makes them feel good. The second one is about creating meaningful work. I've worked in teams where we've been doing stuff that really isn't very meaningful. 𝘰𝘭𝑵𝑗𝑗 is waving at me. So it's this question about how do we actually create meaningful work in the context of that ever-changing environment and creating that purpose in the team, even though it might not be there in the organization. How does the team work together to actually support each other and say, come on, you know, this is what we're really about. Let's do something that makes sense and is meaningful for us. The how we cope with our emotions is one that I've grappled with throughout the whole of my career in terms of emotions in the workplace, and that can be both positive and negative emotions. And how do you cope with those in a team? So I was thinking, well, something that talks about that would actually be quite helpful. So I'm kind of thinking about, when I was writing this book, I was thinking, you know, if I were coaching a team, what would I really want to know? And if I were in a team, what would I be struggling with that would make me think, oh, we need some help with that? And one of the things that I talked about just a few minutes ago was that behavioural science. And this is all about understanding the biases and rules of thumb that we use every day that sometimes get in the way of our best decision making. So I wanted to put something in there that was evidence-based around how our brains work, and also helps teams access it in a way that isn't too complicated and that they can use in a practical setting. So that was what that question was about. And then the question about conflict is one that always comes up in teams. And I know that some teams shy away from conflict because they think it's bad, but actually conflict is really necessary because that's where you get that creative juice. If you don't have any conflict in the team, it usually means one of two things. Either the people in the team couldn't care less, or there are underlying issues that they're not really willing to resolve, and actually that's going to get in the way of the performance. So understanding that conflict is part of a natural ebb and flow. If you think about our personal lives, that we have conflict in our personal lives all the time, and guess what, we tend to deal with them okay. Yes, there are stressful times, yes, there's times of pressure, but overall, you know, we tend to deal with it okay. Yes, obviously when it gets too much, then that's a different situation, but generally we tend to be able to cope with conflict as humans. That's what we're designed to do. So that final one about resilience is understanding how do you help teams gain that resilience so that they can work together in a team. And then what happens when the team disbands? How can they use what they've learned in other teams so that they can then spread the love across the organization? And it could also be community teams as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a for-profit situation. You can have community teams. You know, I used to be in a drama group, and man, that's a really interesting team to be part of. I certainly see a lot of conflict in drama teams because, of course, performers, that's what sort of gives energy to the performance. So yeah, if you want to understand about conflict, go and do amateur dramatics. You'll get it from the get-go. So those were the key questions. So again, I don't want to be talking at you all the time. What I'd like you to do, and I'm hoping this is going to work, you should have somewhere on your screen a toolbar which has the word annotate on it. And if it isn't on the toolbar, then there are 3 little dots, and if you click on them, you should see something that says annotate. What I would like you to do is to just click on that annotate button, and then you can use a stamp, or you can write, or do whatever you want. Just put against which of those questions is the question for you that really is the one that challenges you most, or think is most challenging when it comes to teams. So which one of those is the most challenging when it comes to teams for you personally? And if you can't find the annotate button, then please just put it in the chat box. That's good as well. We can be flexible here. So I can see 2 votes so far. Okay, somebody's typed in the chat box, excellent. So I'll put that one on for you so that we can see it. Okay, so we can see that understanding our thinking is getting some votes. We've got a couple of votes through conflict. Yep, so there's another vote on conflict there, and also resilience. So those are the questions that are the real sort of ones that are sort of capturing your attention. And question 2, oh, we've got a vote for question 2 now, creating meaningful work. Yeah, definitely. And I think probably with the pandemic, I don't know what you're experiencing, but certainly that meaningful work has become even more apparent as maybe lacking, or people are seeing the importance of meaningful work now more so than ever. Fantastic. Okay, and we've got another vote for conflict. Okay, so I'm just going to stop that, and I will need to, hopefully, I will need to clear the what's the annotate bar. Come back. It's a bit tricky, so I need to clear all drawings before I move on to the next one. Otherwise, it will save it for the next one, which we don't want. Okay. So now you're thinking, okay, so you've told us the questions that you're asking in the book, but what's in the book, Ro? Tell us what's in the book. So guess what? I'm going to tell you what's in the book. So these are all the core chapters in the book. So you can see that hopefully I've covered all the bases. So we start with team coaching, understanding the principles and the core premise of the book. So that is really getting to grips with why you as a team coach might want to coach the team, and understanding what principles you're setting out for yourself. Chapter 2 is really about getting to terms with the definitions. So the term self-organising, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, the term self-organising has got many and varied meanings. And it's been around, the concept of self-organising teams has been around for a long time. And so there are different terms that are bandied around. So I do a bit of a deep dive into that. And for anybody who wants to understand how I wrote the book, I actually did a lot of research. I can't remember how many books I've read now, but I've read a lot of books and articles because I really wanted to understand what has been written about the topic and then come to my own conclusions about what meaning I put on that research. So you'll see in chapter 2 of the book, I actually go into a lot of detail on that. And I have a little sort of ready reckoner that talks about how you can measure where you are on that spectrum of self-organising. I also talk a little bit about team coaching as well, because it's important to understand what team coaching is versus anything else that you might be doing. And team coaching is a very specific approach. It's not facilitation, but you might use facilitation skills. So I talk a lot about that. And again, because I've written tools, you know, Gillian and I have written many, many tools, and Charlotte and I have just written a load more tools for change framework. So I'm really into my tools. So there's a little tool that talks about how you can compare the different kinds of intervention you might do within a team. So the next one is about how you set up for progress and success, which is that's where we're really starting to get into the coaching process as such. And it's talking about how you gain agreements with the team and how you set up the team so that you can work with them in a way which is helpful for them and enables you to help them in a way that's productive. Then my favorite chapter, the group think trap, which is all about behavioral science. So again, it's a very, very easy to access chapter. And I've done a little bit of a table in there talking about some of the biases and giving you some thoughts about what you might do in terms of working with those biases. So you can never stop a bias from happening. It's a phenomenon. It's something that you observe. However, we know that the way the brain works, there are things that we can do that then help mitigate some of those behaviours that you might then observe in the group. And as with everything, it's about the group making sense of their own world. So it's not you as a coach going in to tell them, it's about the group actually, or the team coming up with their own sense making of what's happening. Then we go into healthy conflict, and I did quite a bit of research around this. There's quite a lot of research around constructive conversations, or various terms for constructive conversations. So I got into that and looked at the different kinds of conflict. And there's a brilliant model that was written many, many years ago by a guy called 𝘫𝘫𝙁, who, as you could probably spot, is German. And so I've included that tool in there with my own translation of the terms. So hopefully I got them right. Oh, sorry, group think trap wasn't the tools. Oh, yes, no, it was. I've got tools and techniques in the other chapter as well, which is also does include some behavioral science tools as well, but it's got many more tools in there, and I've broken it down into different categories. And then finally, how to cope with change, because as we know, the key thing that's going to create resilience in organizations is that ability to cope with change, and also to understand what might be behind that. And there's a brilliant paper that I refer to by Martin Seligman and his colleague Steve, whose surname has just gone from my head, where they look at some of the research that was done around learned helplessness, and they talk about hopefulness. So I talk a lot about that in How to Cope with Change. And then the final chapter is really about understanding whether or not self-organisation is for you. So the key premise of the book is really about, you know, not all organisations suit self-organising teams. So you need to be clear when it's going to be helpful and when it isn't. And I touch a little bit on some of the current research that literally has come out this year around humanocracy, which is by Gary Hamel and Michelle Zanini. And they talk about how to reduce bureaucracy in organisations. And clearly, self-organising teams is one of the ways that you can actually do that. So that's a little soup song of what's inside the book for you, hopefully to whet your appetite. But to whet your appetite even more, What I've got here is just a little, and I'm conscious of time because I want to give you an opportunity to ask me questions as well, but I'm on my passion point and it is my book launch, so I've got the right to talk about this. It's a great topic. So what makes a real team? And again, the research around this, there are so many books on this topic you would not believe, which is really interesting in itself. So the first thing is that a team works interdependently. If there are no good reasons for the team actually working together, if they can do things on their own and what they do doesn't have an impact on the team, then really they're not a team, they're just a group. And often in organizations, you see teams on the organization chart, and really what they are, they're just a group of people reporting into the same functional manager. So it's really important that, first of all, when you're thinking about, is this a team or not, how much will they rely on each other to get the job done? If they don't need to rely on each other to get the job done, then it's likely not a team. The second one is a shared goal and purpose. So the team obviously needs to be working to the same endpoint. If it isn't, then it's likely that you've got different agendas going on. So of course, when we're coaching a team, getting that out into the open, understanding what is the actual purpose of the team, what are you trying to achieve, what are you here to do, that's probably where you spend a lot of time, particularly with teams that are newly formed or teams that may be in a bit of a disarray. And the final one is the shared responsibility. You know, just because you in the team might be responsible for delivering something, you've got a shared responsibility to that end goal. So if you spot the team member is struggling, then you go up to your colleague and say, hey, look, you know, can I help you with this? Because obviously we need to achieve this end goal here. So that shared responsibility where everybody feels equally responsible for the outcome is what distinguishes a real team. So that's a definition of a real team. So what about self-organizing teams? Because I said there were lots and lots of different pieces of research around this. And so these are the sort of the principles that I came up with that sort of seem to gel after reading all of the different papers. I was thinking, and I struggled with this for a while. I was thinking, well, what is it? What are they? And I had to go away and come back to it, redo it and think about it. And then I think these are the ones that I landed on because they seemed the most pertinent from the research that I've been doing and what I'd experienced as well, so a lived experience. So a self-organizing team can assign tasks. They don't have somebody coming in telling them, you do this, you do that. They can actually assign the tasks themselves because it's clear what they're trying to achieve, hence why that real team definition is so important. They're also able to make decisions about how they do the work. And depending on what level of autonomy the team has, they might even be enabled to make decisions about where the team does the work and with whom. So again, and I talk about scoping and boundaries in the organisation in the book. There's also something around behavioural norms that they're able to create standards of behaviour for themselves. It's not somebody from outside setting those behavioural standards. They actually do that for themselves. And that links in again to that autonomy and self-direction. They are working together, they are self-directed, and they are able to make that decision, you know, they've got self-governance, if you like, around that decision-making process. And then the scope of authority is that it's very clear what the borders of the team are. You know, the team is responsible for this, they're not responsible for that. And when it's in an organizational setting, obviously that then is about the policy that the organization has for what the team can decide and what delegated authority they have, how they work within the organization. And we have worked with some organizations that have that very much self-organizing model where they have teams that are completely autonomous and have complete decision-making for how they do the work. So that's my definition of self-organizing team. So hopefully that gives you a good direction in terms of whether or not, if you're working in a team, whether or not it's truly self-organizing. And I know we've got some Agile coaches on the call today. So it'll be interesting when we get into the Q&A to maybe have a chat about that. So that's the sort of a flavour of the book. I am going to be doing a book launch series every Thursday up to Christmas. So we've got 2 Thursdays to go, and I'll be talking about groupthink in the first one. So next week I'll be talking about groupthink. And then in the one just before Christmas, which is the day after the book officially gets published or comes out into the bookshelves, I'll be talking about tools and techniques. I'll talk through how I create tools and the kind of tools that I've got in the book. So you'll get a bit more information on that as well. So join me for those 2 calls next Thursday and the Thursday after. And Aliona's just put the Zoom link to those in the box. And we will let everybody know who isn't on the call what the Zoom link is as well. And there'll no doubt be stuff that Aliona will be helping me with on LinkedIn and social media for that. Then in January next year through to March, I'll be doing weekly self-organising teams coaching calls, which you can join in, and I'll be taking a theme from the book and I'll be going into a bit more detail. So I'll be sharing with you in more detail the research. I'll share with you how I came to the conclusions that I came to, and hopefully talk through some of the tools that I've got in there. So there are tools spread across the whole of the book, as well as the tools in the chapter that I've specifically mentioned. So that's an opportunity for you to get into even more detail. And for some reason it's not, so here we go. So to whet your appetite and to incite your action or bias to action to actually buy the book, I've got some book party bonuses. So the first one is for, if you buy 1 copy, then you'll get access to downloadable graphics from the book. And you'd also get an invite behind the scenes, look at how you coach teams. So I'll talk through the coaching process, and you've got an opportunity there to ask me questions as well. So if you buy 1 copy, that's what you'll get. If you're working in an organisation and say you wanted to have your team to have a copy of the book, then if you buy 5 copies, I'll give 30% discount on any team coaching program for 1 team. So if you want to do that, then please buy the copies and let me know, and then we can have a chat about that. And then the final bonus is if you buy 10 copies, I'm very happy to do a 30-minute coaching session on transitioning from leader to coach. And this is one of the topics that I talk about in the book, because at the moment we're seeing the move from leader to coach or manager to coach. And that's quite a challenge for some people to actually make that transition. And I talk a lot about that in the book. And I was very grateful to 𝘤𝘰𝘢𝘐 for her insights to that, which led me in this direction and then gave me the sort of inspiration to write what I did. So I'm very grateful. So there you go, book launch party bonuses. So how do you get those? What you'll need to do is you'll need to let me have a copy of the receipt. So if you buy it online, I just need to see that it's got your name on it and it's got the book that you bought, so you can obviously blank out everything else. And just email that to me and then we can have a chat. Obviously, if you buy 1 copy, we'll make sure you get the downloadable resources, and we'll let you know when the behind the scenes look at coaching teams is going to happen. It's likely to be back end of January next year. Okay, so next step, buy the book. And the link, I think Aliona is going to put that link, sorry, the call of the time of the call next Thursday is the same time as today, 3 o'clock. So it'll be 3 o'clock next Thursday, 3 o'clock the Thursday afterwards. So Aliona, if you wouldn't mind putting the link in the chat box to the book, that would be great. Obviously, you can contact me. You've got my contact details. Please just give me a shout and then join the call next Thursday. So before I say thank you, I would just like to have a party. It's a party, so you've got to have some cool prizes in the party, haven't you? So this next one is going to be a type in the chat box to the first person who can type the answer to this question in the chat box, and I will take a range on the number here. So you don't have to give me the exact number if you want to give a range. So the first person who types this in the chat box, they will get a digital copy of the book. So what's the ideal size for a team? Blimey, O'Reilly, I've seen such fast typing. So let me go back up because I need to find the first person that typed it in. Oh, blimey. And so I'm left-handed at the moment, so hence why it's taking me a bit longer to faff around with the, and the winner is Connie Howe. Well done, Connie. Woo, 8. So 8 was the number I was looking for. I would have taken anywhere between probably 5 and 12, but I was looking for 8. 8 was the number I was looking for, so that's spot on. Brilliant. Okay, so now I move into the next thank you. So I've got lots of thank yous to say here, and I just wanted to make sure I publicly thank everybody, because this is really important to me, appreciating people and saying thank you. And I'll try not to get too emotional, because I am very, very grateful to everybody who's contributed. I'm particularly grateful to 𝘰𝘢𝘐𝑆𝑡, to 𝘫𝑗𝘬𝘐, to Jason Little, to Laurent Proudhon, to 𝘊𝘰𝘢𝘐 Miles, to Richard Scott Will Harknett, and to Ian Jackson for their contribution and willingness to be interviewed for the book. It really helped me, and I got such inspiration and insights, and I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'd also like to thank the series editor, Professor David Lane, who, thank you, 𝘊𝘰𝘢𝘐. So Professor David Lane has written the series foreword to the book, and he's given me some great feedback, both on the original book scope and also the manuscript when I sent it through. So thank you very much, Professor David Lane. I also want to thank Paul Gibbons, who is also an author in his own right and has written an amazing book, The Science of Successful Organizational Change, along with millions of others. And he's also written the foreword to the book, and I'm immensely grateful to him for that. And also his ongoing support and encouragement. He is just a brilliant supporter, both for Charlotte and I, and a great inspiration and a massive brain. And I just love all of his work. I also want to thank Jennifer Britton, who wrote the recommendation for the book, which is on the cover. And she's a fellow team coach and group coach, and she has been inspiring me since 2011. She is not only a great coach and author herself, but she's just an amazing human being. So thank you, Jen. I'd also like to thank my business partner, Charlotte Maul. In the last few years, we've had some amazing team experiences, and they've been the sort of the resource material, if you like, thinking back to some of those experiences and what we observed. So thank you, Charlotte, for that. To my husband, Richard, who always gets to read the drafts, even though he doesn't want to. So thank you, Richard. And to Aliona Montoya, who is our marketing assistant, who's done a brilliant job on the marketing and the graphics. And it's made all the difference. And I'd like to finally say thank you to Sarah Glenister, who is going to facilitate a further question and answer session. So Sarah, without further ado, over to you, and I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Well, thanks, Ro. I mean, I'm sure everyone will give you a little cheer and a round of applause. It's been great knowing you in the last couple of years through Australasian Change Days, of course, and seeing the progression of the book as we go. And it's I know how much work it has been. That plus Australasian Change Days. Anyway, so there's quite a few questions, and so the first one is around can you see any difference between like an established stable team using some of your techniques and a team that is maybe emerging or is as the result of a restructure or a reorganization?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And there obviously are differences, because as we know, context is really important. What I would say is that where you've got a stable team, sometimes you might think, oh, well, that's going to be easier because it's a stable team. And sometimes it isn't, because they sometimes get into that pattern of behavior. So, you know, oh, we don't do this in this team because of X, Y, Z. So the work there can sometimes be around getting them to shift their thinking in a different way. Whereas if you've got a team that's newly formed, particularly out of a restructure, that the focus is obviously going to be on developing the relationships. And, you know, with any team, it's about developing that safety, that psychological safety, and getting the individual members to know each other and trust each other. And I talk about that in the book, that psychological safety is very much about the group or the team, whereas that trust is very much, you know, I trust you because I know you. And you've got to have both in a team. It's not enough that, you know, the individuals get on and trust each other. You've got to then have that in the team, that people feel comfortable to actually call things when it's not working, and equally to support each other when it is going really well, and to celebrate each other. So I think it's context is always king, I would say.
And another, well, a sort of similar question, but in terms of just using this in different populations, what would your guidance be around people who are on the spectrum in teams?
Yeah, that's that's a really interesting one. I think if you've not had any experience of coaching people on the spectrum, then it's probably going to be quite a hard challenge for you. I would say probably this is where you niche. So I would say if you're a team coach, you might want to niche in an area where you have a greater understanding of that kind of personality, because I think it could be quite confronting for you as a team coach. But that's not to say that you might go in and somebody might not know that they're on the spectrum. Then, you know, there are lots of people who haven't been diagnosed, and I think, you know, maybe it's about making sure that you practice those listening skills. It's always about going in with listening. It's also about going without making any assumptions, and also gaining, because part of the process, and I talk about this in the book, part of the process is about where you do discovery. So, you know, you would very much be finding out those things at the beginning. And if it was known, then you would be asking the team, you know, how do you normally cope with this? And the individual, how do you normally cope with this? What works for you? What doesn't work for you? So yeah, that discovery phase is really, really important in establishing that. And and I'll go back to, obviously, if that's something that really interests you and you have expertise around that, then that's, as a coach, where I probably would niche. I would say, you know, my expertise is to work with teams around cognitive diversity. It's the way that I would express it. And then you're immediately telling a potential buyer of your services or an organization, that's the area that you specialize in. But that discovery process and always going in with a listening ear is the way that I approach everything. But that's the way I would suggest that you approach it. And there are discovery questions in the book, by the way.
So if you were buying one of these books and wanting to do this for your team or your organization, would you suggest you create a team yourself within the organization to actually work through the book before you start testing some of it out? Or do you think it's something that someone can do on their own?
I love that. I love that. Yeah. So you can certainly create a learning team. So, you know, go back to what is a real team. So thinking about, you know, what would then need to be in place for that to be a real team. So you'd need to have a shared objective and goal. And obviously it's about learning how we coach a team. You'd need to understand, okay, what are we each going to be doing that's going to be contributing to that goal? How will we be holding each other to account, and making sure that you've got that shared purpose in place and you've got that interdependency as well. You know, that's probably going to be the hardest thing for a learning team, but you can still do it. You know, how would I rely on, it could be that you say, okay, well, you take that bit of the book, you take that bit of the book, and then you will be responsible for learning about that. You will be responsible for learning about that. And then you come together as a team and you share and learn based on what each other is learning, and hence you then create that interdependence. So you can definitely do it, and it would be a learning team as opposed to a work task-based team. I love that. Whoever suggested that, I love that.
So you could really have your own community of practice to develop it.
Yeah, brilliant.
So also, Collart asked a very big question about what's the big change you'd like to see in the world and why. You're welcome to answer that one, or maybe just in organisations or executive teams. But what's some of the big changes that you would like to see?
I always love Collart's question because they're always deep questions, and I've known Collart for a long time, and I love that question. So for me, I have to say, part of the reason I chose self-organising teams is because self-organising teams is about democratising the workplace. And if I were known for anything, that's what I would want to do. You know, recognising that employers obviously employ you, but at the end of the day, there's not only one way of employing people. And I think we've got into this very old-fashioned way of thinking about employment. And self-organizing teams just completely throws that on its head. You know, there are many big organizations hire one of, you know, a huge white goods manufacturer in China uses, in effect, self-organizing teams, a form of self-organizing teams. And it works really well. They're like little entrepreneurial units. And so that democratizing the workplace is really what this is about, because it's about distributed leadership. There is no leader in the team. It's about what is relevant, who needs to lead this particular piece of work with the relevant skills. You know, let's have a look, what needs to be done, who needs to take the lead on this. So yeah, I think that's a great question, Colette, and you're probably not surprised that that's my answer either. Back at you.
All right. So what about the impact of pressure on what has been a previously happy, effective, cooperative team? Can you prepare for that in advance?
Is this about going with the normal ebbs and flows and knocks and bumps along the route that you experience?
I suspect it's more about being hit by something big out of the blue. So yeah. A team that has in the past performed or worked well together is hit by, they call it a tsunami. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a great one for team coaching, actually, because sometimes when you go into a session or you're working with a team, something has happened before you go into that session. So I'll talk about it in that context. And it's very much about allowing the team to make sense of it in their own way. So do they want to unpack what's happened? Do they need to process it before we can have a conversation? What do the team want to do with it? I think often in organizations, you know, we're told to be solutions focused, come to me with solutions, not problems. But actually, when things happen, you sometimes just have to call it for what it is and say, do you know what, this is really bad and it's not great. We're all experiencing this. It's had an impact on us and we just need to process it. Mm-hmm. And then you use the approaches in team coaching to actually work through it. So I think you have to recognize that we're all humans. And that's part of working in a human system. So that would be my approach. And, you know, other coaches might, I know we've got a couple of team coaches on the call as well, and they might have a different view, but that would be my approach.
So if I've never led a team before, do you think this book is still, that I would still get value out of getting this book and help me develop a great team in the future? So
the focus of the book is coaching self-organizing teams. So you're not necessarily going to be leading the team, you'll be coaching the team. So definitely will help you do that. And it will then help you take a coaching approach to leadership as opposed to a telling approach to leadership. So, you know, I would always say that as a leader, you might have to go into tell mode if there's a crisis. You know, there are times when you have to be decisive and just come up with a plan. Always, though, if you can, go into that coaching approach, because at the end of the day, you want people to be self-sufficient. And so if you take that coaching approach, then they're developing that self-sufficiency naturally. So I'd say it would help you coach them. It wouldn't necessarily help you lead them.
How does this book link in with your other books?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I guess this book probably is the child of the group coaching book, if I put it like that. So I wrote group coaching back in 2012, funnily enough, when I moved to Australia. So I started writing that in the UK, and then I finished it on the beach down the road. I had my dictaphone and I dictated the last chapter while I was watching the ocean. So that was all about coaching groups, and groups are very different from teams. So groups, you can have a diverse group of people coming together who want to do, you know, learn something or achieve something, but they're not necessarily interdependent. They don't need each other to do it. They're just learning together. So in that sense, it is a learning team. So that was kind of the start of the process. And I learned and I've expanded my knowledge around behavioral science. I've expanded my knowledge about the myths of change, and looked at some of the science behind some of the tools that we use. It's kind of evolved my thinking. So it's definitely the child of group coaching. And then I would say it's also the niece of how to create a coaching culture, because you know, Gillian and I wrote that book because we wanted people to be empowered in organizations. So the comment I made earlier about democratizing the workspace, that probably wasn't as well formed when we were writing that book in my mind, but certainly that's where that seed started life, and it's grown and flourished into the book that is now Coaching Self-Organising Teams.
Okay, let's talk about Agile. Is it appropriate for Agile workplaces or Agile teams? I think is what the question is meaning. Yeah,
so for those of you familiar with Agile, you know that one of the principles of Agile is that self-organising teams, you know, work better than non-self-organising teams, to paraphrase it. So it's definitely appropriate for Agile. In fact, I talk about quality circles in the book, but Agile obviously has a lot of roots in the quality movement. And so self-organising teams in the quality movement will be quality circles. So yeah, it's definitely appropriate for Agile. I do talk about Agile coaches in the book. I apologise to anybody who's an Agile coach in advance, but I am quite, I challenge some of the concepts of Agile coaching. And I know Jason contributed to the book as well, so I apologise, Jason, if you're listening to this. Hopefully you won't be too disappointed with what I've written. So yeah, it definitely applies. With Agile coaching, though, you are typically going in, and I'm not, this is a huge generalisation, typically you are going in with tools and techniques. With team coaching, you are going in with a process, in effect, but it's not a hard and fast process. You may use tools and techniques, you may not. Ultimately, it's about creating a space for the team to learn, and you are not driving that learning, the team is. Whereas in Agile coaching, typically you're employed to teach Agile tools and techniques. Carlotte's nodding, so I think he would agree, yeah. So yeah, it's definitely appropriate, and I think it might also challenge some of the thinking around how you do Agile coaching as well, hopefully. I'm hoping that's what it does. Whether it does or not, you can let me know, but that's what I'm hoping.
How do you think this the self-coaching team works well, or do you think it works well, and how do you think it works in a complex system, or a complex project, or a complex organization, or a complex challenge?
So obviously I'm going to say this because I wrote the book, but I would say it works really, really well, because what you're actually teaching, in effect, teaching the team to do is to become very self-reflective, to actually have adult-to-adult conversations, to create their own processes. So I think it works really, really well because it's an emergent process in its own right. And so if you think about complex systems, they're emergent, aren't they? You don't know what's going to happen. So I think the coaching process actually maps really well to what they're going to be experiencing in those complex environments. And I think it also gives them, you know, I'm thinking about a team that I coached recently, I actually think it gives them the confidence to go with the flow as well. Often we want to have things nailed down and certain, and life just isn't like that, even when we think it is. And so if you take a coaching approach, then you're going to be in a much happier place, because you realise that you can learn stuff from emergent wisdom and the wisdom of the team, but you've got to listen to it, and you've got to allow it to happen.
So probably the last question before we are going to hit the mark. What have been some of the pushbacks that you've had in organisations or teams, or have the teams that you have coached experienced back in their organisation?
So the sort of things that you get pushback on is not the right time to do this. We've got too many other things going on, that's probably the time to do it, because obviously that's going to help the team perform even better and more effectively and efficiently. I've also had we don't want to do any of that kind of thing because it might rock the boat. So usually when people say that, there's usually something going on in the background that means that the boat's already on a rocky shore. So those are the two ones that I've experienced most often. And then I guess the challenge that any coach faces, which is what is it about? What will it do? How does it work? And you can explain that to a certain degree. The key way to do it is as a lived experience. You can only really understand what it is until you've experienced it. And that's quite difficult sometimes for organizations to, because they're taking a leap of faith that it's going to be helpful. So yeah, but when the team gets into it and they really work with you, you definitely see the difference. But those are probably the areas that I get most pushback on, or most comments about, team coaching or coaching as well.
Well, I think that's probably it, unless anybody has something that they'd like to open their mic and ask very quickly. But thank you so much, Ro. It's pleasure as always. And yeah, I will definitely be wanting my signed copy as soon as it's available. So thank you.
Brilliant, fantastic. Thank you so much for coming along. I will share, you've got my details, I won't bother sharing the last screen, but I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who's made it today. Thank you to everybody who commented on the LinkedIn post and invite. I was really, really thrilled and overwhelmed, and I'm very, very grateful to everybody, as I say, who's helped me. So thank you very much indeed. Thanks for coming along, and see you next Thursday, same time, same place. So next week we'll be talking about groupthink.
Is it good or not? As long as everyone thinks like me, it's all good, right?
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you all.
Thanks very much. Good to see you all again. Take care. Thanks, Yumi. Thanks, Carl.
Bye.
Thanks, Ro. Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.